We'll do a review on Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Hey, volume 25. This is the second Sicha for the portion of Vayishlach. And this Sicha is a Rashi Sicha. It says that Yaakov, when he came to Shechem after his encounter with Esav, it says Vayikan. He purchased the Chalkas Asod. He bought it for Meir Ksita. What exactly is 100 Ksita? So Rashi says that Ksita happens to be a mo. And there's another piece in the Rashi. Well, the Rebbe will go through Bipshuta Shal Mikra, but the question in the middle of the Sikha, the Rebbe wants to know later on when Chamer and the Medina was trying to Shechem was trying to, when Chamer is saying how much money you spent for, but if only gave a meyaksita, that ends up being 5 shekels. So why does Rashi translate the word kisita, which is uncommon, to mean a moa, a gera, which would be a total of 5 shekels, not like the other Mefarshim that said that he gave a lot of money for it, whether it means cows, it means pearls, I mean, would be a lot more, and that seems to fit with what Rashi says later on. The Rebbe will explain that actually the reason why the pasuk is Bichlal telling us the amount of money that he spent was not a large amount of money, but the fact that he gave important money, as the Rebbe will develop the whole Sikha, we're learning the Sikha in memory of Harav Levi Yitzchak, our son. Your Yortzeit is coming up in 2 months from now. And we're also concluding the Sefer Torah in his memory and in memory of our son-in-law, both two young special chassidim of the Rebbe who died at the age of 43. Tainish Mosem Tzrur B'Srei Rachayim made this learning and study be L'Zecher Nishmosem. We'll go step by step. Vayishlach Beis, Aleph. In Heintiker Sedre Werder Zelt. In today's portion, it is related. As B'Shas Yaakov is gekommen kein Shechem asher beretz Canaan. When Yaakov came to Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, hat gekauft Chelkas Hasode asher noto sham oloi. He bought the section of the field in which he pitched his tent. B'mei Ksita, he paid 100 Kisita for it. Not known exactly what the Mei Ksita. It's interesting, the Rebbe will also bring out that the purchase of the land was because of that special love that he had for Eretz Yisrael coming there. As we'll see, a lot of interesting, very enlightening and inspiring points of this parasha. But here it says, plain the pshat, he bought it for 100 kisita. What is 100 kisita? Stellt sich Rashi from word kisita. So Rashi places himself on the word kisita. Und is mefarish mo. He says, a kasita, that's a mo. Now, mo is a gator. We'll see later on. And esrim gator, esrim mo is a shekel. And times 5 would make 100 mo. So Rashi explains, what is kasita? It says mo. Mo a gator. That's the smallest, I guess, the coin that was there. So the Gemara Rashi brings down from the Gemara. He says, "Omar Rabbi Akiva, kisha halachti likrache hayam." When I went to the cities overseas, to the big cities overseas, hayukoidim lemo kisita. They would refer to a mo as kisita. They will also explain why. Does it say Rabbi Akiva? Why does it say that he went to the Krache Hayam? But nevertheless, Rashi says when Rabbi Akiva went there, Hayukoirim Lemo'o Kasita. They would refer to a mo, which is the gator, the small amount of 20th part of a shekel. They would call it Kasita. So we see that a mo is a kasita. That's the evidence. Und noch steht in Chatzoi Yigel. Then there's a parenthesis. This parenthesis is actually not in the first versions of Rashi. It seems like a student of Rashi added it later on. The Rebbe is going to explain it within this whole explanation of the Rashi. So what does it say later on in a Chatzoi Yigul in a parentheses in the Rashi? V'targumoi churfan. The translation of the Targum for Kisita is churpan sharp, which means tovim. They're good. So Meyo Kisita means not just gator, it seems, but they were good gators. They were churfan. Tovim. Charifim b'chol mokim. They're sharp all places. Meaning that they're used. Sometimes coins are only used in certain places, but the good coins, the sharp coins, they're used everywhere. Kegoin, this is similar to the case that it says by Avram that he gave him the 400 shekel to Ephraim. It says, Oiver lasoicha. This was the uh, Oiver lasoicha. Okay. So, what is the reason? Uh, I'm looking over here that in noch steht in Chatzai Eagle, it starts a parenthesis over here, but I don't see the end of this parenthesis. Maybe there's supposed to be. Uh, the Rebbe will explain all this later on, but I'm just thinking over here, where does this parenthesis end? Maybe it's supposed to end the noch steht in Chatzai Eagle. After the word Chatzai Eagle should be the parentheses. The Rebbe is in the parentheses. The Rebbe is saying that this is a parenthesis appears in Rashi. The Targumoi, so Churvan, so this parenthesis in Rashi, this looks like a student of Rashi, as the Rebbe will say later on. He says that the word Churvan means Tovim, that they're good ones. Charifim b'chol mokim, they are sharp, they go everywhere. They go through, they're used everywhere. Der Tam farvos Rashi darf mefarer sein dem Wort Kisita. Now we know why Rashi has to explain what the word Kisita means. It's very unusual. We don't know. What the Rebbe wants to ask is, why does Rashi explain it the way he does? Why Rashi needs to explain it, we know. Rashi Kisita is moving bepashtus. That's understood simply. Hayois as Kisita is nit kinteva regila klal. The word Kisita is not a common use at all. There's one time the Rebbe says that it's mentioned outside when there is a repetition of this story itself. It's mentioned in Eve one time, so we need to explain what Ksita is. Achutz in Soif Yeshua. Besides, in the end of Yeshua, over there it's just a review, a repeat of what took place in our parsha. As Chelkas Hasoda Shekona Yaakov is given b'mei Ksita, that the portion of the field that Yaakov purchased was mei Ksita. So he quotes their Ksita, but that's the exact. This is the Ksita in our parsha. So outside of that, not Emol in Soif Iyuv. We only find it once in the book of Iyuv that over there is mentioned the word Kisita. Vayitn lo ish Kisita achas. They each gave it one Kisita. We don't know exactly, but the word Kisita. So we know why we have to mention it, but we don't understand why Rashi translates the way he does. Therefore, beverstehen muss der über Rashi abteitschen fahren ben Chumash lemikra. That's why Rashi therefore needs to translate it for the 5-year-old who is teaching Chumash. As Kisita meant more, that Kisita means more. Und bringt the Raya, and Rashi brings the evidence. How do I know that it's more? Because Omar Rabbi Akiva, Kishol Lachti, Chulu. That when I went Lekrakayam, I saw that they called it Kasita was a more. So that's why he brings that down. So we have evidence, and we know that we have to explain it. But there's other explanation which seem to be more fitting. The Rebbe argues, the Rebbe questions. And therefore, we need to, however, understand emes as in krake hayam. How you could let it be true that in these cities overseas they would call a mo'o ksita, the coin mo'o was called a kisita. Men gefit aber in Chazal, what we find in our sages of blessed memory, other interpretation of the word kisita that Rashi could have chosen. Noch pirushim from word kisita. We find other interpretation what the word of kisita means. Kimoy. For example, in Targum Yonason, the Targum Yerushalmi, in the Targum Yonason and Targum Yerushalmi, over there it says kisita means margolian or margolios, which would mean pearls. He gave him 100 pearls. Kisito, so what is the root of the word kisito? Is from Lashon kishutim, adornments, which you adorn yourself with pearls. So that's why he gave him 100 pearls. That's one interpretation. So you see, Targum Yonason, Targum Yerushalmi, Rashi could have quoted that. Base, another interpretation that Ibn Ezra in Eve over there on the pasuk that he gave him, the Rebbe quoted Ksita Achas, he teaches over there in Eve, Zokt as Kisita meint Kipso Ketana. Kisita means a small sheep. Only common Meforshim, and according to other some of the several Meforshim, is dos the Kavone in Targum Onkelos do. That's what the Targum Onkelos means. He was is metargim Kisita Churfa. So Rashi could have used the source of the Targum Onkelos because some Mefarshim say that when Targum Onkelos, of course Rashi can't use the Ibn Ezra as a source, comes after Rashi, but the Ibn Ezra they want to say is really saying the same thing as the Targum Onkelos. When the Targum, Rashi could use the source Targum Onkelos. But is Metargim Kisita. The Targum Onkelos translates Kisita Churpan. So churpan, they want to say means not like the parentheses in Rashi tight sharp, but they say churpan v'megefind frier in Parshas Vayera. We find earlier in the portion of Vayera in the Targum Onkelos over there it says Sheva kivsois hadsoin. It says the 7 kivsois hadsoin. So the sheep. Of the herd over there. So it says Sheva Kvosis is Unclus Metargim Chorfon. 7 sheep means sharp or Chorfon, not sharp over there, it means sheep. So we see that the Targum of a Keves means Chorfon. So Rashi could have used Targum Onkelos according to that meaning that it means Chorfon. So Rashi had 2 other choices. Instead of saying from the Gemara Rosh Hashanah that it's like Rabbi Akiva, that it's a mo. So, was is der hechrech im Pshuto shel Mikra? So, what forces us in the simple meaning of the pasuk to taichen ksita mo, that here ksita means mo, v'meruftas bikrake hayam, as it is called in the cities overseas, unit v'di targumim von Eretz Yisrael, not as the targumim from Eretz Yisrael. Now, Eretz Yisrael, the Shechem Beklolo. So, Shechem was part of Eretz Yisrael. Here we're bringing from Krake Hayam. But here we're talking about Shechem. That's where he bought it. And so why don't we say like the Targum of those places, the Targum in the place of Eretz Yisrael, which is Shechem includes, Margolian, that it means the pearls of their kivsa, or it means a sheep, the Targum Yoinus and Yerushalmi, Targum Onkelos. The pearls, like according to Targum Yoinus and Yerushalmi, which is Yerushalmi, or the Targum Onkelos, which would be a sheep, like the Ibn Ezra says over there, and they say that this is what it means there too. And Ubefrat, the Rebbe says especially, as in Breishis Rabbe werd gebracht, let Girses Aruch. In the Breishis Rabbe, according to the version of the Aruch, he reads in the Breishis Rabbe, as Chazalam abgelernt von a Isha b'shuk shel Arvim, that they learned from a woman who was in the marketplace of the Arabs over there, Kipshute be'ir de Chazal. Literally, it was in a city of our sages where they lived, and there was a marketplace of the Arabs over there, but wasn't Bekrak Hayam, it wasn't overseas, it was something local as Kisita meant over there, the Aruch brings from the Bereshis Rabbah, other Margolius, other Keves, either pearls or sheep. Veloy Kilosha in the Krakayam, not in the Krakayam, yeah, over there they called it Kirais Rabbi Akiva. But why do we have to go to Krakayam, the way they called it over there? Why don't we say that Kisita, what we found in the Shuk Shal Arbaim, which was within a city of the Chazal, and they called it Kisita. And over there, Kisita means Margolius, so they're Kevis. Why does Rashi choose the version from the Gemara Rosh Hashanah? It's something which they typed it in Krakayam. So, of course, in Krakayam, this is the fact is Rabbi Akiva says they called the Ksita Amor. But why does Rashi have to say that this is the pshat in this pasuk over here? Now, why does Rashi say that it's money? Rashi could say that it's either pearls or it's um, a sheep, a small sheep. Now, one can argue maybe you purchase for money. So Rashi feels more comfortable translating it that Meya Ksita means money, Meya Mo, instead of saying sheep. But the Rebbe says that's not necessarily the case because, first of all, in the olden days, people would trade with exchanges. Uh, and number two, if the Torah is actually, if Ksita means Mo, we have another difficulty. Why does the Torah say 100 Mo versus saying 5 shekels, which would be the more comfortable way to say? So the Rebbe says like this. Although generally you buy things with money, which is coins, which is kesef, with silver, you buy actually with money instead of buying with pearls or sheep. But the Rebbe says number one is Aleph, B'yimeim is doch gewend der Steger von Chalipin. In those days, the usual way was to exchange. As we say, Mechir Kelev, Esna the exchange, there was a lot of exchanges going on over there. So changing, uh, purchasing a field for exchanging for other things is actually pretty common. But number two, it almost makes more fits more simple the meaning that it's not money because if meya ksita means meya mo, why does the Torah write it in such a strange way versus saying 5 shekel base benidin de dan pshas men red wegen aschum von meya mois when we're talking about an amount of 100 mois is derech ha also become a mekoimis. The usual way of depositing in many places to umgeben the mispor in shkolim is to give the amount in shekels and not in kleiner matbeis, not in smaller, saying 100 smaller matbeis. Ubinyonenu. So in our case, what is the amount? Vibal dazat shekel hot 20 more. A shekel contains 20 more. How I know that? Because the posik of Loshna Kosov esrim geiro ha-shekel, that each shekel has 10 gera, and a gera is a mo. Rashi's mefarish says gera is loshamoya. So when it says esrim gera, that means esrim mo. Now the shekel consists of 20 mo. Hader posik on shtot meyo kisito, instead of the Torah saying 100 kisito, gedar zogen chamisha shkolim, 100 kisito is 5 shekels. So that's the usual way the Torah uses larger amount, not the smaller amount of saying 100 gera. It should say 5 shekels. And another argument is why would the Torah choose to say meyo kasita versus meyo gera? Like we said, does more beloshem Torah is gera, since and more in the language of Torah is gera canal, as Rashi brings down when it says esim gera, that's more. The pasuk Yidav Zogim B'Mei Geda. Okay, it doesn't say smaller number, but why Me'eksita? Is there food Mukhrach L'Chayra? So that should actually force us to interpret as B'Mei Ksita mean more. That doesn't mean more. Nor margolius, kivosar, kietzabai. It means something else, either pearls or sheep or something different, and not money. Because if it is money, why would the Torah call it kisita instead of meya geta? Why would the Torah say 100? Why does the Torah not say 5 shekel? It almost implies that we should translate it otherwise. So while Rashi has a Gemara that says Rabbi Kiva says B'kraki Ayam, but why does Rashi choose that? It seems like, according to the Targum Yonasan Yerushalmi, and also according to the Targum according to the Onkelos, according to some Mefarshim, that they are choosing to translate it as pearls or sheep, and that would make more sense, seemingly, in the pasuk. And here the Rebbe throws a bombshell of a question in his base. If we take translated as 100 Gera, as Rashi brings down, so he ended up paying Yaakov only 100 Gera, which is 5 shekels, for an encampment that he bought. That seems to be a very reasonable amount. So why is later on, when they're trying to convince uh, Dina to stay, for Yaakov to let Dina stay, so we're saying that what the Shem ben Chamoir was convincing her to say, look how much money your father had to spend to buy a small piece of land. You marry me, you own it all. What is he talking about? I spent a whole lot of money. What? 5 shekels? 5 shekels for a place to stay? And the Rebbe is going to say, it doesn't just mean for his own little, where he pitched his tent, even though it says in a singular language, but it really represents all the whole camp. Buying all that for 5 shekels is not such a large amount of money. It makes more sense to say that the Me'exida was 100 pearls or 100 sheep. That would be a substantial amount of money. Let's look. So, how could Rashi say that Me'exida is just 100 Gera, that it's 100 more, 100 Gera, which is 5 shekels? Based, the plea is not good. I said the surprise is even greater. Weiter, if Pasuk later on the verse, Vaydaber Shem aleva naida dina. That Shem speaks to the on the heart of the child, of the lad, of the girl, of Dinah. His Rashi Mefarish, he spoke to her convincing words. He was trying to convince her. Dvorim hamisyashvim al halev. He was telling her things that make sense. They settle, the heart accepts them. Ri, he said, take a look. Avicha bechelkas ketano. Your father on a small, tiny piece of field. Kama moment business. How much money did he have to spend? Waste, chulu. Is oib kisita meant more, but if, like Rashi said, kisita means a more, und Yaakov hat den ganzen gezahlt. And Yaakov entirely, all that he paid was chamisha shkolim, 5 shekels, for their soda for the field. Wie sagt Shem, how could Shem tell Dina, oh, come on, mom and business, your father spent, Yaakov spent all this money, wasted to 5 shekels. Well, the Rebbe says Rashi's source in the Medrash is talking about the Medrash could be teaching Ksita not more, not 5 shekel. He's talking about pearls, it can talk about sheep, and therefore in the Medrash it makes sense to follow, it fits to say, look how much money he spent because he had to get all. But Rashi had just finished saying that it's a gera, is that Ksita is a more, which is a gera, which is in total 100 gera, 100 more, 100 Ksita is 5 shekels. So what is he talking about? Telling her, look how much money you spent. Rashi doesn't fit. The mocker from the Pirush Rashi is in Bereshis Rabbah. The source of Rashi is in Bereshis Rabbah. Aber in Bereshis Rabbah is eine Veran kama v'kama Pirush. But in Bereshis Rabbah there are several interpretations of Derech Hadrash. In word kisita, in the word kisita, was Leute die alle Pirushim kommt to is, as a stake given kama moment. The other, they touch Ksito differently than Rashi, that it's only a mo, it's a gator, it's a 5 shekel altogether. They touch that it was a lot, whatever it was there, but it was a lot. Mashenki, so it's fitting for the Medrash Rabbi, but Leut Pirush Rashi as Ksito is mo. Ksito means only mo. This is doch nit kein schum Gottel kinalt, and then it's not a large amount, as I said before. So what is he talking about, Shem telling Dina that it's a big amount? Now the Rebbe says, maybe, it says he pitched his tent, and he bought the piece of the field. Maybe he's talking about such a small, tiny piece of the field that he purchased just for himself. Maybe 5 shkolim could be considered to be a large amount of money. Maybe. But the Rebbe says that even though it says he purchased his portion, but why would the Torah leave out how much he paid for everything else and just tell us about his portion? That his 1/10. It's probably included. Rashi says, even though it says in a Lashon Yochid, it includes, as Rashi says elsewhere. Look, let's look inside. To answer. It's very difficult to answer this as mitchelkas asoda asher not sham ahaloi. That when, what does it mean? The portion of the field that he planted that he pitched his tent. Vadocha Yaakov batzolt chamisha shkolim, for which he paid 5 shekels. Werd gemeint, bloß der mit zum dicker Shetach, wo Yaakov hat gestellt sein Oil Proti, it's only talking about that very narrow, restricted area that Yaakov puts his personal tent. It says, Asher not Sham Oli, where he puts his tent, a very small piece. Aber for dem ganzen Shetach was hat gekauft, but the whole area he had to buy to place all of his families and the cattle, everything. Was hat gekauft? For sein ganzer Machne, for his entire camp. Was is given a ribu godel, that was tremendous amount. All enosh of the tents of his wives, Ubonav, and his sons, Vavodov, and his servants, Neisef of Kol Mikneu, in addition to all of his cattle, Chulu. Hat the Tagi gezahlt das Geld. He paid a lot of money. So here, this didn't represent how much he paid. He paid a whole lot more. So when Shechem was telling Dinah, look how much money your father spent, he wasn't talking about that one little bit of tent that he had to pay for. He was talking about the whole lot of place that he got for everybody else. For his, he only paid that 5 shekel, the 100 me'eksita. So the Rebbe says that doesn't really. So why is the Torah, if he paid elsewhere, why is the Torah telling you just what he paid for his own pitching of his tent? It's not logical, or doesn't really, it's not likely, as the Pasuk of der Zählen wegen der Knie von dem Shetach Cotton, the Torah relates to us about purchasing this small area, which is given El Yaakov, which the tent of Yaakov stood. Und nicht der Monnen wegen der Knie von größeren Shetach für sein ganze Machne. And the Torah admits, doesn't tell us that he paid more money for everything else. Why would the Torah singling out and telling us how much he paid just for one little piece when he had to really buy a lot more? Und der Rebbe legt sich zu sagen, and therefore it's logical to say, as not Tosham Oloi, that is, when it says that he bought the piece of land that he pitched his tent, he's not talking about his personal tent. But Tzitzich nit nor zu dem Oil Proti Shel Yaakov. It is not just referencing the personal tent of Yaakov, nor zu kol hamachna sheloi, but to his entire camp. Und afal pi as a state oholoi. So how could it mean he purchased? Oh, he said that he pitched his tent. So the Rebbe says we find the lashon yochid when it means many. Lashon yochid hat es shein Rashi bavorim betchilas hasedra. So Rashi already cautioned to answer this in the beginning of the sedra. If in passing by Hili Shoir was to me an ox, he was telling Esav, he had the ox, he had many oxen. Why is he saying he had an ox? Is it Rashi Mefarish that Cheretz Loimer Ashvorim Harbe Shoyer? The nature, people talk, the nature of the world is to say, when we talk about many oxen, they say ox. As we see many times before in the Chumash, wo der Pasuk sagt, Vayet alle ukeyetzaboy. The Torah said he pitched his tent or similar to it. It's not talking individually. Und the kavanah is nicht zu ein oil, nor zu ganze machna. The intention is not to one tent, but it means the entire camp. So the question goes back: if he paid for this entire camping over there of his whole country, paid 5 shekel, how could Shem say to Dinah how much money your father spent 5 shekel to house and to purchase and to be able to settle such a big uh, camp, a group? It's not a lot of money. Something doesn't fit here. Mela, the Medrash Rabbe, he learns that he gave him a lot more. He gave Meir Ksita means something else, more than 5 shekels. It means pearls or whatever, or cattle, but it was expensive. But Rashi, how does Rashi bring the Medrash Rabbe when he just says that he only spent for it 5 shekels, 100 Ksita? And then the Rebbe also asks several questions in the Rashi. Rashi seems to give whole lengthy, all the details, instead of just saying straight it was more, and to bring in the proof like this. Rashi gives the whole details. Rashi should have, when bringing the evidence that it means aksita means a more, he has to say it short. He says we become a mekayim v'pirush Rashi, as we find in many places in Rashi. Mo Rashi says kedisa b'Rosh Hashanah. That this ksita is a mo, as the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah. Okay, it's a similar. Not quoting the Gemara, not bringing down. Rashi's over maitik prote hamayim. Rashi goes and quotes the details of the saying over there. Kshalachti l'krak hayam, and I went there, and what is all these details necessary? It's a more, like it says in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah. Number two, Rashi chooses the language that he went to Krak Hayam versus what seems to be the other language that we find, that it actually that he went to Africa. And there needs to be a reason why Rashi chooses one over the other. Why would Rashi choose the Rakayam over Africa? In Gemara, Lefanenu is the Lashon. The Gemara before us, the language is Kshalachti la'Afriki, when I went to Africa. Rashi is October Lekrakayam. So there's not a question that Rashi had a version that it says Lekrakayam. Rashi wouldn't make it up. Krakayam. Rabbi Kiva said that it says so to some version it's Krakayam. So is Afal Pi, although as Memuzog as Rashi Gehat as Agirs in Gemara, we have to say that Rashi had such a version in the Gemara that says Krakayam. She's doch nicht shaykh lechadish as a zach. Rashi can't just make up that he went to Krakayam. So it must be Rashi had a version. So we're not questioning that Rashi, even though in our Gemara it says Afriki, but Rashi had a different version. But still, we need to explain why did Rashi choose the non-common, but we have it to Krakayam. In our Gemara it's Afriki. We still need an explanation. But Rashi brings Dafke the Girsa le Krakayam, that Rashi specifically brings the version Krakayam. Unit the Girsa nefutzel Afriki, not the more common version that it says Tafriki. Why did Rashi bring down Krakayam versus the version the way we have it, which is the common language? And number three, so Rashi gives the whole lengthy quote from the Gemara. Rashi changes to Krakayam from Afriki, and Rashi also quotes the author of the statement, Rabbi Akiva, Gimel. Rashi's Maitik Oichdam Shem Balamaimer. He also quotes the name of the author who gave the statement, Rabbi Akiva. Nit v'berei v'achi godel, not as in the great majority, most majority. For Maimer Chazal, when the Rashi brings the saying of our sages, he brings in his commentary. He doesn't say who said it. He just brings it, quotes it. So here he brings down Rabbi Akiva. And the Rebbe says, if you compare it in other places, Rashi says that when I traveled to Tzkrakayam, Rashi says, doesn't quote the name of the statement over there. Even in other places where Rashi brings down the story, the proof from what it's. The Tmei wird größer. Wenn man vergleicht Pirush Rashi da mit einem ähnlichen selben Pirush Rashi, with the similar, same kind of Rashi, auf dem Wort Tichru in Parshas Devorim. Over there it says when they will go, they will purchase the water. They won't take from them like that. They drink the water. They will. So Rashi says Tichru in Parshas Devorim. Rashi says Loshem Mekach. Tichru means you'll purchase. And Rashi says Shekain b'Krakayam kodim l'mechira kira, because in Krakayam they call mechira. So Rashi quotes Krakayam. He says they call their mechira sale means kira. That's Rashi's proof that tichru means purchase. But Rashi doesn't say that Rabbi said it. Afa piyas im sechter Rishon dort. Then in the Gemara Rishon over there, Zokter Omar Rabbi. Here it's Rabbi Akiva. Over there it says Omar Rabbi. Kshalach lekrakayam kodim l'mechira kira. Rashi says the quote from the Gemara without saying that Rabbi said it. In the Gemara, it says that Rabbi says when Rabbi said, when I went to the Krakayam, they would call Mechira Kira. But Rashi doesn't quote that. He just says, Shekein hoyu koiden Mechira Kira. By us, he says, Rabbi Akiva said, Shalach lekrakayam. And another place in Rashi, Valderech Zeh, Pirush Rashi, of word litoy tofis. What does it mean? So Rashi says, Tat Bekasvi in Kasvi is 2. And Pas, Tat, Pas. And Pas, Ba'afriki is 2. 2, Tat, Pas. Tat in Katvi is 2, and Pas, Ba'afriki is time. That's the 4 compartments that we have in the Tefillin, the Tofos, the Tat, Pas. And over there, so he brings down Tat Pas from Afriki and Katfi, and yet it doesn't say the author of the name. So why does Rashi bring down Rabbi Akiva? There has to be a reason. The Rabbi explains that usually in others that a student who's sharp will ask a question, and Rashi brings down the name of the author to answer him what the name of the author is, and also why Rashi has to bring down, especially that Rashi in other places doesn't bring down the name of the author, as the Rebbe asked in question number 4. 3 and 4 are basically the same. Why say Rabbi Akiva? But the Rebbe in 4 shows that in other places we don't mention the name of the author, even though it's very similar to this Rashi over here. And the whole reason Rashi quotes all this, now the Rebbe is going to explain the parentheses in Rashi that the student of Rashi was coming to say. And the Rebbe is going to amazingly prove that the other interpretations in the parentheses, the Rebbe shows how it's not really what it means. Let's just see first what the other Mefarshim, how they explain. The Negeya dem Sim in Pirush Rashi, the end of Pirush Rashi, Vashteit in Chatzoi Yigel, which is in a parentheses. It says, V'targumoi chulu. And Dargo. Es Charifim, seine verarme Forschung was willen sagen, der arme Forschung, I want to say, as die Werte seien nicht von Rashi, that this is not Rashi's commentary. Uwe mezet take, as in dem ersten und zweiten Fuß Rashi, as we see in the first and the second print of Rashi, seine de Wörter nicht da. They don't exist. So it means that's not Rashi himself. Nor sie seine nahe Sofe. But they're an addition. Now they say, von a Talmid Toye, from a student that made a mistake. The student misunderstood. He misunderstood the Targum. He quoted the Targum Chorfan, and he understood them as sharp. They're saying, the Mefarshim, that this interpretation is a student who is mistaken. What's their evidence? Warum? Wie kann man sagen, as kavonos Chorfan, shebetargum? How could we say that when the Targum uses the word Chorfan, is charifim b'chol mokum, it's sharp, over lasoicher, it is works everywhere. So that's the meaning of Chorfan. We can't say that because the Targum bringt Chorfan. The Targum brings down the word Chorfan als Übersetzung von Kvosis, the Parshas Vayera Kanal Sifalo. The Rebbe quoted before that in the Posik that he placed the Kvosis, so Rashi, the Targum translated that he placed the Kvosis Chorfan. So Chorfan means Kvosis. Kvosis is Chorfan. So how do the Mefarshim say, can Chorfan mean here sharp, that they're used everywhere? Rashi himself, or Targum Onkelos himself, translates that Chorfan means sheep. So therefore, what it means over here, Me'eksita, according to those Mefarshim, according to Targum means sheep. It doesn't mean Chorfan sharp. So this was a mistaken student. And the Rebbe amazingly says, no, that student didn't make a mistake. On the contrary, this is the pshat in the Targum, and we have to say that, the Rebbe said. First of all, the Rebbe wants to establish the fact that if the student was a mistaken student and he was really wrong, not from Rashi, how come it still continued in all the editions that we have it today? Must mean, so we have to say that there is some validity to it. Aber Afo became. Davon was die Werte seien geblieben in the Fusse Rashi and Futzim. The fact that these words remained in the prints of Rashi that are common, that are spread out, is mistaber zu sagen, as euch der Pirush in Targum hat an Ort. It's logical to say that also this interpretation in Targum of the student that sharp makes sense. We can say that also. Not only that, the Rebbe says we have to say that. According to the argument of the Mefarshim, how could Rashi translate Chorfan, Ksito? How could the translation mean sharp when the translation of Kvosis is Chorfan? So Chorfan means sheep, not sharp. So the Rebbe says, very simply, what is the taich always of sheep in the Targum? It never translates it as Chorfan. It's always translated as Imri. That means sheep in Targum. Why did Punk, the Targum of Kvosis, translate there of Chorfan? And the Rebbe says, no. The Targum sometimes clarifies the meaning. So over there, the Targum is explaining what kind of a sheep. He put them as a testament for the Shvuah. So they were good sheep. So that's a commentary on Kvosis, not the interpretation of Kvosis. So the meaning of Charifin is taka like the Talmud says here. It's not a contradiction from the previous interpretation of Charifin and the word Kvosis, because over there, that's not the regular translation is on. I mean, let's look inside. The Rebbe says it's more than this. We have to say that it doesn't mean over there that the word charifin is not the translation of the word sheep, because the question is, why would the translation of the Onkelos all of a sudden, Mohei no sheva kvosis, the word kvosis? So over there, Targum Onkelos says churfa. Why up over there? Umetun in Onkelos mit Targum kefes imra. He always translates keves as sheep as imra. So he should have translated kvosis imra. Why up mit Tamol churfa? Beloma Yishtanu Kvosis from Parshas Vayera. Why should Parshas Vayera? It's a klotzkasha. It's an amazing question. Why did it all of a sudden the time change there? So the Rebbe says, because why? So then we have to say that Churfon is taken not Kvosis. Imra is Kvosis. But the far darf man lernen. As the Pshat in Targum of Kvosis Hatzoin, he says, Churfon the On, Tzoin is On. Churfon is kvasis, but no, churfon is not sheep. Is not as churfon meant kvasim. It doesn't mean churfon means kvasim. Nor kvasim meant on. So kvasis hatzoin. Kvasis means on. Kibetargum shom. So it's both. Kvasis hatzoin is on. And churfon, it's not churfon the tzoin, it's churfon the kvasis hatzoin. Gebedark schon Tagung gesagt bekam kommen ist meise Bier wenien as is eine Charifim. Gute Zeit. So basically there is no targum on the word kvosis and tzoin separately the way we're learning it. Tzoin is on and kvosis is churfa. No. Kvosis hatzoin is on. These are all on. And churfun is an explanation. What kind of a on was it? What kind of a tzoin was it? It was special tzoin. Keep it dargum shom. And the targum of gedarka bekam mekaymis is meisi bir beinyan. He explained this wasn't regular, but it was special tzoin. Gute tzoin. Why does he explain? What does that explain? Was durch dem Juvan der Inyan was they seinen given leeda v'chulo. They served as a testimony that they're not going to fight. Avimelech is not going to fight with him. And that's going to be the testimony that I dug this pit, but he was telling to Avimelech. So why did he use them as those kvosim? Because they became a testimony. They were good. As kum zu in avonas pshutus mikro, durch der Sofa von Targum Churfan, it gets to additional explanation in the meaning of the pasuk by saying the Targum Churfan, but Churfan is not the translation of kvosis, and Churfan means sharp, and it means over there sharp. It means over here sharp. Churfan the on doesn't mean kivse hatzoin. It means sharp on, sharp sheep, good sheep. But we need to still explain over here, what does it add to the meaning that it was sharp? Was hat der Talmud, Rashi? What did the student of Rashi, the Rebbe writes the word Rashi in a question mark, maybe this was Rashi. The Rebbe doesn't, first of all, the Rebbe said, what the Talmud, even if it's a Talmud, he's correct, because it's logical, because it's difficult to explain that kvos, that churfun is means kvosis, but that's what the Rebbe says. What did the student or even Rashi, what did they want? Gewollt meisiv sein. What did they want to add in Avonos Pirush Rashi? When Rashi said that Ksita meant more, durch Zugeben Betargumoi by adding the words Ketargumoi. So the Rebbe, here came up and he said that this Targum is not only not a Talmud Toya, but we have to learn that the word Churpan in the Pasuk, the reason why they argue that this is a Talmud and it's a Talmud Toya, because Rashi said before, that it means Churpan, so he translate that Kavosis is Churpan, so Churpan doesn't mean sharp. But the Rebbe says, no, Punkt verkehrt. Why would Rashi all of a sudden over there say Kavosis means Churpan and not Imri, as he always says? So he says Churpan is a translation in addition to the Pasuk. That Kavosis Atzoin is the sharp sheep to explain why he made them as a testimony to Avimelech that he dug that pit. But the question is, what does it add to our explanation? So uh, the Rebbe comes up here also with another Gewaldige insight in the answer. Hey, the Rebbe explains that entire purchase of the field that Yaakov purchased wasn't, he was looking for a place to live. It wasn't a piece of real estate that he wanted to use. It was only a temporary dwelling place. Why did he have to purchase? It's because he loved Eretz Yisrael. As soon as he came to Shechem, which was Eretz Yisrael, he came back to the place, Shavtil Beisavi, he wanted to express his appreciation to Hashem and thanks to Hashem for bringing him back. He buys a piece of land. But that was not a permanent sale to live there forever. It was only for a very temporary basis as he lived there. He moved on to Hebron. So Memele, this is what the pasuk is talking about over here, and we're not talking about a lasting real estate that would cost more money. Well, let's look inside. Hey, we can say the explanation and all of the above. The hechrech zu zogun as kisita meant more. What forces us to say that kisita is more? Is not from my Rabbi Akiva. That's not because of what Rabbi Akiva said, quoted from the Gemara, "Ksholachti l'kraka yam chulu." That's not the proof. Rashi doesn't need that for the proof. Those bringt Rashi nit azoy al sraya. The fact that Rashi says Rabbi Akiva said l'kraka yam, that's not to prove the meaning of the word moa. That's not so much for that purpose. Nor beikir al seisofa biur kid l'kama sivov, but mainly to tell us, as it says later on in Sivov. Nor von Teuchen HaKsuvim. It is the meaning of the psukim. The psukim alone, it's not the evidence from there. That's not the main thing. That the Rebbe was saying will just to prove that what he gave, the kind of money that he gave, that the mo is a kind of very important and very, very special money. But the pashtus in that it means a mo is from the very simple meaning of the psukim, and the fact that the Torah tells us what he paid for the field. Why is the Torah telling us that? Learning them sipur, because you look in the pasuk before even you get into what the Gemara says from Rabbi Akiva Kraka Hayam in the psukim itself. Learning them sipur, as when Yaakov is angekommen in Shechem, that when Yaakov came to Shechem, hat gekauft Chelkas Hazoda Ashenot Sham Oholoi. He purchased that portion of the field that he pitched his tent. He purchased it. Bli shum pratim, without any details. Leitzich bepashta, so it makes sense simply to say, zu sagen, as rot the far batzolt mechira rogil. He paid the regular price. Valsis given a kniya regilo. This was a usual purchase. This wasn't anything unique. Sometimes when Avram needed to buy the field for Sarah, he had to have that burial place for an eternal inheritance. He needed it. No, he was desperate. But here was a regular purchase. But sich nicht gedungen mit dem V'chulu. There was no negotiations like by Ephraim, there, how much to pay. Und sicher ist Hepech Hapshat zu sagen, and for sure, it defies the simple meaning to say, as Batzol Domim Merubim, that he paid lots of money for it. Doesn't that? Uh, when we talk about Morris Machpelah and other places, Rashi uses Losh Domim Merubim. He paid lots of money, but here, no. Why would he pay Domim Merubim over here? Avram had gezolt Arba Meir Shekel Kesef Ever Lasicha. Avram paid 400 silver shekel that is usable Lasicha for the Morris Machpelah. Why did he pay such a price? But let it gemusst haben die Morris Machpelah Chuzas Korov, because he needed that Morris Machpelah as an inheritance for the grave. Oh, but in our case, is doch Yaakov gewesen inmitten von Gein Lovel Yitzchak Lov. He was in the middle, he was on the road. He was heading to his father. His father was in Hebron. He was going in Hebron. Und wie Yaakov hat man lachatchile beim Avegim from Beis Aviv. As Yaakov, to begin with, when he left his father's home, gesagt bit Filose, he said in his prayer, B'shavti b'sholem el Beis Aviv, I'll return in peace to my father's home. So he wasn't along the road. He wasn't settling there. He was on his way to Hebron. Why did he purchase? Und der Tam was Yaakov de Chelkas Asodi gekauft, the reason why he bought it, und Avke do bei Shechem, here by Shechem, where is given 6 Chodoshim. He was there 6 months. He was in Sukkot before he was 18 months. Und nicht früher in Sukkot, where is given Yudches Chodoshim, a summer, a winter and a summer, it says, Rashi says, so he was there for 18 months. Why is he by over here all of a sudden? He's not given if zu besetzen sich dort. He wasn't going to settle there. But er ist gegangen, lechevren kanal, he was on his way to heaven. Nor blois auf a reis zu weisen sein Chavivas Oretz. That was just to show how dear the land Eretz Yisrael is to him. As gleich, beim Ankommen in Shechem Asher Beretz Canaan, as soon as he came to the land of, city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. In dem Land was der Eberstadt ihm zugesagt, weggehen von Beis Aviv. It's the land that Hashem promised him when he left his father's home. I give it to you, and I will bring you back to this land. So Hashem promised him to. As soon as he was back to that land, so he bought a portion of land. Rabbi explains, it's a phenomenal explanation why, after being in Sukkot for 18 months, he didn't buy anything. All of a sudden, Shechemi buy it, because this is the land. He comes back to Eretz Yisrael. That's how he expressed his impressions of Eretz Yisrael. And so he paid the regular price over here. He didn't need like Avram to play. He didn't need that. He wasn't going to pay extra money for it. He had no reason to. Und mit bald, as the Knie von Chalkas HaSode is nicht given, zu machen dort sein Hiris Keva, since he bought that portion of land, not to make it his permanent residence, nor bloß Adidas Arai, only a temporary, is nicht mistaber, as es overum von dem Batzol Yosef von sehr wert. It's not logical that he wanted to pay for them more than it's worth. He didn't want to pay money, a lot of money, as we find in elsewhere, like by Avram. Und der Fahr ken Rashi nit onem aderach hapshat, and that's why Rashi Pshat has the option to explain that it means pearls or it means gold. That would be a lot of money. Then Pirush and Targum Yenison as Kisita meint Margolies, that it means pearls. If we said that Pshat, it will turn out as Yaakov had gezolt Gora Goris Mechir, that he paid a very expensive price for what? For temporary staying over there, buying it for a short term. Mehr Margolius. Und befragt, as bepashtus is das noch mehr von Arba Meis Shekel Kesef. That would be even more than 400 Shekel Kesef for Adidas Arai. Only for a temporary house. Doesn't really fit. So Rashi asks, Sita meint mo. Rashi mo. Yaakov had the Chelkas Asod Batzot Nor Meya Mocha Bishus Kolim. He only paid Meya Mocha Bishus Kolim for his temporary place to live. Okay, so now, okay, a regular purchase, a regular price. So we know that one pshat of Ksita is more. But the question is, why does Rashi say the other pshat? The other pshat would be too expensive. But if he paid the regular price, why is the Torah even telling us how much he paid? L'mainav Kimina. The Torah wants to express, that learns the Rebbe, that he gave even the regular price, but he gave it in ksita money. That's the way he expressed the dearness to it. He paid the regular price, but he gave it with good money to show how dear Eretz Yisrael is to him by giving ksita money. Question on the other hand. If he didn't pay nothing extravaganza, regular to the Tzelem Hilf Yaakov Tzolfa the Soda. Why do we need to know how much he paid for the field? By Avram, it's important that he wanted to have that land. He was ready to pay a lot of money for it. It remained his. He wanted to buy it as an achuzah, as an inheritance. And he didn't want they should have any claims to it. It should be totally his. But here he's not, he's just buying it for a while. Why would the Torah tell us how much he paid for it? He didn't pay anything special. By Avram, so why does the Torah tell it to us? The Rebbe learns to tell us that he bought it with ksita. By Avram, was hot sold domim merubim Avram, that he paid lots of money. He's just moving. Why the Torah is understood? Why the Torah tells us how much he paid? Well, the Torah will der mitlosen Herren. The Torah wants to teach us with that. Aleph, goydla chavivus von achuzes kevern Eretz Yisrael. How great is the dearness, the specialty to have a part of a burial in Eretz Yisrael. And number two, tell us about how the greatness of Avram's conduct. The Maile Boifen Hanagosi, the greatness in his conduct. As is in Kedai given zu zollen as a price. It was worth it for him to pay such an expensive price. Arba mei shekel kesef. Over la shekel, 400 shekel kesef. And on top of 400 shekel kesef, that very good shkolim over la shekel. Abi shoyl zayin betachlis. As long he wants to reject, negate totally the Bailus from Ephron. Ephron has no ownership. He paid fully. He paid with Over Lasoicher to tell us that he has no connection with it anymore. It's fully Avram's. Oder the Shlilu von Anamira, he didn't even want him to say, like we find in the Pasuk, Avram refused to take anything after he won the war over there with the kings. He says, don't give me anything. In Misrech Vanal, so you don't say, Ani Hasharti Avram you made rich. Avram didn't want to say that Avram did me a favor, he gave it to me. He didn't want him to be able to say that, so he paid. This tells us about Avram and Haggad. That's why we Torah records why he paid him the 400 zuz over la and the value, everything, the two reasonings for that. But what's the point of telling us that he bought it for 100 ksita? Aber wenn in the Dan, Bernarkes Maiko Maschman zu der Zählung, what does it teach us to tell us? As Yaakov had gekauft the Chelkas Hasoda for 100 more, that he brought it for 100 more. Muss man sagen, therefore we have to say that while as Ava Piaz had bloß gezahlt 100 more, even though he only paid 100 more, hat aber der Tashlum vermogta Chashivas, that payment had an importance. This payment did represent something important. Was beweist of Chavivas Oretz, which shows on depression of land. Und der Fahrer that zählt the Torah wegen dem. That's what the Torah tells them. How do we see that? Rabbi Kiva goes to Krake Hayam. Krake Hayam, that's big cities overseas. And over there, they would refer to this mosque, Kisita. The word Kisita means an adorning. This means that this is a very special, this is the Iver Lasoicha. If he just said he went to Africa or something, okay, who says we don't know what it is? That's why Rashi brings down to Masbir Zayin. Was for Chashivas ken sein in Azat Tashlum? What kind of a importance could there be in a payment of these 5 shekel or in the five or the 100 Gator, the 100 Ksita? Bringt Rashi, my Rav Akiva, he brings this statement Rav Akiva. When I was going to overseas, to the big cities overseas, they would call Moksita. Why would they call Moksita? An adornment. That means, wie der Mann früher, is the word Kisita von Loshen Kishutim. That's the reasons other people say it's pearls, because the word Kisita comes from the root of adornment. Wie kommt es, as man soll anrufen Amo? How come Amo is called Kisita? Adornment is nothing. This must mean, this is gewaltige Chiddush, that this Kisita, we're bringing a proof from Rabbi Akiva. He went to Krakayam. How come you're calling a Moa Ksita such a small coin? Kishutim. Why is it adornment? That means Zetman. So you see, sometimes a small amount can be an adornment. Azidafal, that there is a situation, a case, when the shavius from the madbeis mitzadatzma is not gross, that maybe the value of the coin in itself is not big. Werden sie aber genutzt als kishutim, they're used as adornment. They may not be worth on their own, but as an adornment. Und sie werden dafür angerufen kisita. They're called kisita because of the adorning quality that they have. Und da sagt der Posuk, and this the Posuk is telling us, as mitzader chibes haaretz b'nei Yaakov, because of the special love that Yaakov had for Eretz Yisrael, hat for a chelka be'oretz gezahlt, so for a section in the land he paid, mit spezielle choshev matbeyes, he paid with specially important coins. Meyoksita. Azelche moizos werden genutzt al tachshitim. He gave out such coins. This is not regular gator, not regular amor, which is called kishutim, that they're called tachshitim. That's also the reason why Rashi, because Rashi wants to tell you that importance of it. So Rashi uses the verse when I went to these overseas large cities, because the fact that they make it adornment in Afriki, who knows if it's valued? Rashi specifically says Krakayam, this version. The fact that in Afriki they use these money as adornments, is nit of them and that doesn't point, it's not evidence that they're very important. We don't know any detail. So Afriki, what kind of a city, what kind of a country it was, whether it's very important. And which place in Afriki, whether. So we don't know to give it a importance because they called it over there Kishutim. Ken sein, it's possible as Afrika is given an ort for Anis. Maybe it was a very poor place. Und der Fahrt wird euch am Morgen nutzt als Tachshit. Maybe that's why they use a more as an adornment. It doesn't really represent that this is an adorning kind of a coin. So Trash as in Krake Hayam. In the big cities over there, you coin the Moksita. Filo in Krachim, even in Größe Mischostet, which are big business cities. Fleckman Rufen Amor Tachshit, they used to call Amor an adornment, a Tachshit. Is a Funaraye. That points to their real effort, their real value. So the Rebbe says, while we have to say that he didn't pay Stam more money than what he needed to pay, so he must have only paid the value, the 100 Gera. But why does the Torah tell us that this was an expression of Yaakov's love for buying right-of-ways in Eretz Yisrael, that he gave this special money? How do we know that this money is special? Because why would a Moab be called Ksita? It means that it's used, this is a special kind within the Gera, which is an adorning kind, and that shows the cheshivas. That's what the Torah writes it over here. But Rashi has to bring the proof from the Rashi has to bring the proof from the fact that it's krakayam, because that really tells that this was something important. If he just said Afriki like the other versions, like our version, we don't really know that it's important because we don't know if Afriki is important and we don't know what place in Afriki. And this answers the issues that we had before. Zayin, ab sich verantwortet. Aleph, we have. Was Rashi nimmt nicht on the Pirush as Ksita meint keves. Rashi doesn't learn that Ksita means keves like some of the Meforshim, as the Rebbe brought before. V'afanazat tashlum is nitokin limud inyan miyuchad. Because paying with that, there is nothing special to learn as that is especially important. So the Rebbe before says that it doesn't mean pearls because pearls would be an extraordinary payment, but maybe by sheep would not be an extraordinary payment. And still, Rashi doesn't want to say that it means sheep. But besides the point, now that we're learning that the Targum Onkelos learns that it means Harifin, as the Rebbe learned, so there's not really a so much of a source for that. But the Rebbe says, why can't we say that it means a sheep? It's because there's nothing special to learn from it paying with sheep. That's what we have to say. Money that is ksita. Talking time as the posting of them that sale. That should relate. What I'm saying over here is two things that I see from the Rebbe Sicha. That the Rebbe before says why Rashi doesn't say that it means pearls. The Rebbe says that would be too expensive. Why would he go pay such kind of money? That would be even more than 400 over la soicher, as the Rebbe said before. But apparently sheep are not so expensive, and that could have meant sheep. And the Rebbe explains because there would be nothing unique about it. Why would the Torah tell us how much he paid for it, where it doesn't tell us anything, as opposed to when it means kisita, means adorning kinds of mois, which is a special, gives out Yaakov's chashivas. But the other thing is, which I'm also thinking, that there's really no reason to say that it's sheep anymore if we say that what the Targum means. We don't have the Rashi before, as the Rebbe brought down earlier. Okay, number two, בפשוטו של מקרא בייס, כשיש מוקם לפרש ששילם ה' שקולים, it doesn't make sense if we say that he pays 5 shekels. There is no room, we don't explain ששובה הסודה ושילם 100 שקולים. So it doesn't really fit that the word the field is worth 5 shkolim, and he paid 100 shkolim or 100 margolis, 100. The Rebbe says it over here, 100 times as much, or 100 margolis, or he paid 100 chulu. And there was a the hepech hapshat the pligi b'shovi dover. The end of the day, we know that it was worth 5 shkolim, because that's what Rashi says. Now, you have another pshat that says, oh, no, maybe he paid, maybe it was worth 100. If according to one, it's worth 5, and that's what he paid, so we should say, no, it's 100. It's worth 100, he paid 100 shkolim. If to say mei ksita, that each ksita was a shekel, or mei margolius, that would be epech hapshat, that they're arguing about it was worth. If it was 20 times as much as according to the first opinion. So if Rashi has three opinions, Rashi's not going to choose an opinion. Rashi goes according to the simplest opinion that says that it was worth 5 shekels. And Rashi doesn't want to say another pshat which would increase the pshat so much. Well, again, this is different than what the Rebbe already said before, that he wouldn't pay more than the value. And the Rebbe says it's not logical that the value, but even the Rebbe says you're going to argue that it is valued 100, it's valued 100 margolis. It's not logical that there's such a distinction between them. And number 3 was the posik zokt nit dem sachakel chameshu shkolim of the meir gator nor meir ksita. The posik does not say 5 shkolim. Why does the Torah say 100 gator? It doesn't say that makes it up. Well, the Adgosha is nit of their shavius, because we're not trying to emphasize the value. Nor as Yaakov gets sold for their soda mit azazach was benutzal kishutim. We're just trying to say that he paid with an item which serves as adornments, ksito. We can't use shekels and we can't use 5 shekels. We can't use meya gator because we want to. The point here is he used an adornment. And most logically paid 5 shekels if that's what it's worth according to one pshat. That we're not going to tell you that another meaning in the word ksita. And kefes b'chlal doesn't fit, doesn't know to teach us. Dalit, the kavanah from the Balchatzo Eagle Talmid Rashi was Hatzuyigem Targumei Churfan. What did he add when he said Targumei Churfan? Is toivim, that there is good. Charifim b'chol mokim k'neiver laseicher. They're sharp. They are worth everywhere. They are money that is accepted. Good. The minute bringt sich noch mehr arois the chashivas. That way, it even expresses even more the importance from the matbeis mit welch Yaakov had gezolt for their sode. Those coins that Yaakov paid for the field, he gave the chorfan. He gave the best one. That gives out the kesita, the beautiful. As an given spezielle gute matbeis, they were special good coins. Charifim b'chol mokim. They're used everywhere. So they're kishutim and they're charifim b'chol mokim. And the Rebbe says, Yeshloimar, as mitzugem deraige never lasoicher. When Rashi brings the extra evidence that this is everywhere, just like over lasoicher that we find by Avraham, is the kavone nit nor a dugma v'rayit zum taich. It's not just to give a translation to the translation that it is churpon over lasoicher. That means that it's sharp, that it goes everywhere, nor oich zum teichen. But to remind us that it's the same idea as like by Avraham. Punkt wie the Torah is madgish the cheshivus von Avraham's tashlum. Just as the Torah emphasized the importance of Avraham's payment. Over lasoicher, hazarot gegeben matbeis and given over lasoicher. Then what kind of coins did he give? Those good coins. So Rashi hints to that by saying over lasoicher. Al derech zeh Yaakov gezolt mit matbeis. So Yaakov paid was then given chorfen, charifim b'chol mokim, with those things that are sharp everywhere, because just like by Abram, over there was important to tell us, as the Rebbe said before, that he wanted to make sure that he's giving the best, that they're not going to have any complaints, and there's no bailus over there, they're not going to say we made him rich, gives them everything that they need. Same thing here. It's an expression of his love to Eretz Yisrael. Vayiken, by giving kesita, and giving this chorfan, and giving those sharp, everywhere, that expresses his special difference for Eretz Yisrael. It says later on, the Rebbe asked, Shem said, well, your father wasted a lot of money to buy. We didn't spend so much money. We just said we only gave 5 shekel. And the Rebbe says, the emphasis is not, it says bizbez. Bizbez means he wasted something. Uh, the fact that even he had to pay anything, even though it was a small money. Rashi specifically does not use the language that he paid a lot of money, but he said he wasted money. The Rebbe explains now the issue, how to reconcile. Wasting money is not necessarily that you're paying a lot of money. Wasting money is when it's not necessary. Here he came by temporarily, he had to waste, he had to spend money. And that's wasted money, which you could have everything by yourself. And that's the language of bizbus, the Rebbe says. Hey, das was sagt Rashi, sagt weiter. Hashem hat gesagt zu Dina, kam am Moment bizbus. How much money did he waste? Aber Pias Yaakov hat den ganzen bezahlt Chamisha Shkolim for the Chelkas HaSoda. Even though all that he paid was 5 shekels for that part of the land, of the field. The dik in Rashi is bizbus. Was the badait, Rashi's emphasis, he wasted. Was the badait from bizbus, when we say wasted, is not davke, when it's letztlich a größeren schum. It's not only when we're dealing with a big, a large amount. Nor when this is bizbus, when you waste it. Euch a kleiner schum, even a small amount. Even or das is legamri shalele tzorich. If it's totally not necessarily, men zollt shalele vererich the nötigkeit von der Sach. If you're paying not according to the value of the importance of this item, if you don't really need it, it's called a waste. Weil der is a binyonener. Same thing, bald as Yaakov is dort given below his boy von Arai, since he was there only temporary, is by Shem was not verstanden der Chaviv Zoros ben Yaakov. Shem, who did not understand that the land is important to Yaakov, ausgekommen by him, it turned out as the soul meik sita to spend these adorning kinds of coin, spezielle choshev matbeis, these special important coins, parchelka sodik ketana for a small part, small portion of field is as bisbus, it's waste. So here he's not saying that you spend a lot of money. He said you wasted money because for a temporary place, you didn't have to waste any money and not give the Me'eksita. He didn't know that that was something that Yaakov gave as his expression, that the land was so important to him. So he says, I'm giving you ksita money, I'm giving you chorfin money, I'm giving you good money. And the Rebbe says another very interesting diuk. You see precise language of Rashi. That Rashi does not say when it comes to Yaakov that he spent a lot of money. He says by Avram he spent a lot of money. It was Avram shekel kesef. But by Yaakov he doesn't say he spent a lot of money. Later on in Parsha Ve'era is a very sweet, the precise language that Rashi used. Over there, the Pasuk talks about the greatness, they didn't question Hashem. They did not question, they didn't have any afterthoughts how Hashem is treating them. Notwithstanding, Hashem made a covenant. Laws to the forefathers, laws to give to them, they will get the land of Canaan, the land that they lived in. So Rashi says, they didn't question Hashem. When he wanted to bury Sarah, he didn't find a piece of land. He had to pay a lot of money. Rashi says clearly lots of money over there. But what does Rashi say by Yaakov? He had to buy the land to pitch his tent. It doesn't say he paid a lot of money for it. Because he didn't pay a lot of money. By Yaakov sagt nicht Rashi bedom im Rum. Und er will nicht Meise V'goymer. It doesn't even add. It just says Chelkas Hasod Lintus Oil. It doesn't say V'goymer, which will Rames if the Werte Meir Ksita, to hint, oh, he bought it for 100 Ksita. By Yaakov attacking in Dom im Korim nicht gezahlt. He didn't pay expensive. He says, bloß given Chamisha Shkolim. But just the fact that he had to purchase this, and they didn't question having to be purchasing the land. So the Rebbe answers all the questions that he had before why we have to say ksita means money, it cannot mean a sheep, because why is it called ksita? Can't say that there was Margolies. Why would he pay such a high price? Doesn't fit. And the pasuk wants to say ksita, not 5 shkolim, because it wants to tell you that it's the dearness of Yaakov in purchasing it, and it doesn't say that Yaakov wasted money. Shem didn't say. He just said he said wasted, but didn't say lots of money, and that's also in the next Rashi that I have a quote from Parshas Vayera, where it also doesn't say lots of money. Ches, but by a Talmud Memulach, you're talking about a sharp student. He's a befortit glatik. Still, something is not sit right, is not smooth. Noch im ganzen Bier wie die Matbeis eine gewähnt spezielle Chosh von Matbeis. After this whole explanation that these coins were especially important coins, Ksita, seine sofort bloß gewähnt Mois. They were just money at the end of the day. Und versteht sich, als Lagabe Yaakov ist, als Ashidus hat es nicht gehabt, kein Chashivas. And it's understood that relative to Yaakov's wealth, this had really not that much importance. Is Bemela move on. So it's understood, therefore, as the Iker Adgoshi in Posuk is in the word, the main emphasis is Vayiken as Chelkas Asode. Main thing is that he purchased the field. As Eretz Yisrael is by Yaakov given as a tire, as it glach gekauft achelik boritz, mainly that he bought, that it was so precious that he bought a part in the land. Chotz as ein Dir is given in the mort from Beisobi, his dwelling place was his father's home in Hebron. Since that is the question, is other kushla duchte. So the question comes back: why does the Torah have to tell us the meyak sita, which in the end of the day wasn't really that much? But says as only gave to the tzelum as a gekauft b'meyak sita that he bought it on the sita. Rashi brings down Rabbi Akiva to explain this issue. Gifel hoisofer in chibas haaretz vet ausgedrückt in them. How much already love of the land is expressed as their farzol the posuk dos madgish sein, that the posuk should emphasize it. The meyok sita doesn't seem that it's that much. Rashi answers this by saying that the author of the statement is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva that tells the Gemara in Sanhedrin, the Gemara that tells us in Sanhedrin, as geführt in an Eufem von Chasidus, he conducted himself in the way of righteousness. It is given the Rogil Zakas as Yisrael. He customarily would find a merit for the Yidden, as Rashi quotes over there in the Gemara Sanhedrin. Und damit is verstandig was the Posik is Meisiv Meya Ksita. That's why he understood that the Posik adds 100 Ksita. But later, Chitas Rabbi Akiva, Shirogil Zakas Yisrael, according to Rabbi Akiva's view, who customarily found merit for the Yidden, we need to find in every item, even something which is usual, we have to find the merit for Yidden. Und der Far, afal piyas der Zollen meik sita, and therefore even paying meik sita is nicht kein gewaltiger Chiddush, is not such a huge novelty to pay that amount of money. Darf man erzählen euch dem kleinen Schus? We have to tell us also this small man. Because the custom becomes a nature to always speak the merit of the Yidden. So even something which you don't do so big, you're giving a little bit. Rabbi Akiva mentions that. Look, the Torah wants to mention it to bring even the small zuchus that he gave because he loved Eretz Yisrael. He gave them in Kisita. Yes, the Rebbe explains now, by way of hint we can explain, was Rashi is mighty dem prat, that Rashi also quotes the detail, as Rebbe Akiva is allein gegangen likrak hayam, Rebbe Akiva himself went to oversee. Why is that important to know that I went, that Rebbe Akiva went there? The Gemara zog dort, over there the Gemara says, my chassidus with Rebbe Akiva. Why are we saying Rebbe Akiva was a chassid? Because there's a machlokes in the Gemara over there. What about the minors, Bnei Rishei Yisrael? What did they get? The children. of the Rishoyim of Israel, they have part in the world to come. So while the first Tana says no, Rabbi Akiva Aimer Boim Heim Leil Mabo, that was his Chassidus. They will come to El Mabo. Shenemar Shoimer Pesoyim Hashem. Hashem guards the fools. Shekein Koidim Bekraka Hayam Li Yinuka Pasya. They called Yinuka Pasya. When the Torah says Shoimer Pesoyim, Hashem guards the Yinukas. And that's why they are going to come to El Mabo, because Pesoyim means not fools. Psoim means the young children, as they called Mikrakayam. The Shlemer Adaracharembes, we can say by him, as the Chassidus for Rabbi Akiva, that this righteousness of Rabbi Akiva is not in them klolus einyan, not only in the general idea, in the Reich, in them was zokt. Also, he says, Shekin koidim bekrakayam li nukapasya. Not just that he's saying that they have El Mabo, but the fact that in Krakayam they call the children, the small children, pasya. Their meat is the Gemara Madgish. The Gemara emphasizes as a very viel is given, Chazidusha der Rabbi Akiva zu Mezaken sein Eden. That, to such an extent, was the righteousness of Rabbi Akiva to find merit of Yidden, as it is for him given Kedai de Nesia in Krakayam. It was worthy for him to travel to overseas. As long that this allowed him to find a merit for the Yidden and rule, as that the minors of the children, the minor children of the Rishoyim of Yidden come to Olam Haba. So he had to travel, even that was worth it. Das is Rashi Domaramis. And this is also Rashi's hint. Omar Rabbi Akiva shalachta lekrakayam. Rabbi Akiva says, when I went to Krakayam, the Rebbe says, why is Rabbi Akiva saying over there that he went over there? That in other words, that he went himself to go be able to find that merit here too. In this case, the same time when he went to Rabbi Akiva Geher, as Kodim Linuka Pasi, that he heard that Linuka is called Pasi, and their meat hat Areis gegeben dem Sakles Chusam Shal Yisrael. That's why he was able to give the ruling to the merit of Yidden, the Ketani Boimem Leil Mabo, that the minors of the Shem, they do get El Mabo, is by the Zalbar Alich Likrak Hayam. At that same time, when he went to the Krak Hayam, is another thing is commonly to find the schus. B'schusim shel Yisrael. Again, the chavivus oretz by Yaakov, that dearness of Yaakov, even though it's something similarly small relative to Yaakov's wealth, as it get sold for them chelkas hasoda was his beim given nit mokem derose, that he paid for that part of the land which was not placed where he lived. Meyoksita. Matbeyes was should be pays one adornment, even though it seems not important. This is the zachus that Rabbi Akiva learned at that same trip, that he found the zachus for the Ketanim. He also found the zachus for Yaakov's special dearness to Eretz Yisrael to buy with Kishutim. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Vayishlach, Tov Shin Lamed Aleph.